AEW Executive Vice President Kenny Omega makes an appearance during the tapings of AEW Dark at Universal Studios. Chris Jericho gives an update on his previous details of his New Japan Pro Wrestling contract. Ricky Starks gives the reaction of Tony Khan to his recent Dynamite promo alongside MJF. Griff Garrison undergoes surgery, will be out of action indefinitely. A TNT title match has been announced for the New Year's Smash episode of AEW Dynamite. BRYAN Danielson has been announced for the upcoming Holiday Bash edition of Dynamite on TBS, and the ROH Women's Championship will be defended at an upcoming indie show. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling, and we've got to start off talking about Kenny Omega and the recent AEW Dark television tapings that took place at Universal Studios. A top AEW star made an appearance at yesterday's Dark tapings in Orlando. Now, AEW taped the first Dark episodes at Universal Studios in months yesterday. It was quite a big event, actually, because we hadn't really had an update on what was going on with Dark coming out of Universal Studios. In recent months, they've been recorded and taped during AEW Dynamite and Rampage tapings, but for the first time in months, there was a batch of tapings at Universal Studios, and fans were treated to an appearance from none other than former AEW World Champion Kenny Omega. Omega was in action against Hangang Shino at the tapings. Now, it was not announced when the episode of the show featuring Omega and Shino's match will air. That isn't usually the case. You kind of have to guess, and the matches, because they're recorded in batches, some are put together, some from the latter tapings are added to the first tapings, etc., etc. But Omega, of course, made his return to AEW alongside Matt and Nick Jackson at AEW Full Gear in 2022, where they were defeated by Death Triangle in an AEW Trios Championship match. The match, though, ended up being match number 1 in a best-of-7 series between the two teams for the titles. As of right now, at the time of recording, Death Triangle currently lead 3-1 in the series after their victory on this week's AEW Dynamite show, with next week's bout set to be a no disqualification bout. A lot of people in attendance said the match was very good. I'm not going to give away the winner, but you can probably guess who that winner would be. But certainly it's nice. I mean, look, you always get, it's usually at least like one or two sort of big names appear at the tapings. In the past, names such as Adam Cole have made an appearance. I mean, when Cody Rhodes was still under an AEW contract, he'd be Fuego number 2. So you do occasionally get the big names that show up during these AEW Dark tapings. He wasn't actually the only name that appeared during last night's show that is a big name. Quite interestingly, actually, Jeff Jarrett wrestled on the show at the tapings, which is certainly curious because the history is there of how many times has Jeff Jarrett wrestled. I don't know if it's that specific soundstage at Universal Studios, but of course for a long time, Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling used to be recorded out of that very same soundstage there at Universal Studios. And Jeff Jarrett, all of these years later, he has that dual role with AEW, doesn't he, where he has an office role incorporating live events, but also at the same time, he's a wrestler. He's a television talent, and he wrestled at the tapings. I believe he was alongside Satnam Singh for his match. But Kenny Omega was at that show, so once it airs, of course, we'll talk about it here on the channel, but certainly an interesting story. An update on Chris Jericho, and he's given some more details on his New Japan Pro Wrestling contract, was prior one before he joined AEW. Chris Jericho has provided some clarification on his previous deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling prior to the formation of All Elite Wrestling. Jericho made his New Japan Pro Wrestling in-ring return at Wrestle Kingdom 12, facing then IWGP US Champion Kenny Omega in a marquee match. At the time, it was huge because Jericho was a WWE guy, and him stepping out of WWE for the first time in at that period of time, or since 1999, since he made his debut with the company, it was such a big deal. The Painmaker had a very intriguing run with the promotion, even holding at one point the IWGP Intercontinental Championship in 2018. Now, he last wrestled for New Japan at Wrestle Kingdom 14, facing Hiroshi Tanahashi. On a recent edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer compared Sasha Banks' proposed New Japan Pro Wrestling deal to Jericho's previous paydays with the company, noting, quotes, Voices of Wrestling said that it was a per-appearance deal at the highest price that Bushiroad has ever paid anyone, and they said it was more than Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho made $100,000 a shot when he was working for New Japan, and man, $100,000 a shot, she's going to have to, with Chris Jericho, he was actually underpaid because of how much revenue he drove between New Japan World and ticket sales at the different shows and things like that. Jericho, though, has not one to get details and finances wrong. Jericho has now responded to this report, taking to Twitter to state that he was paid different rates per event rather than a flat per appearance rate. Noting that he was paid well for his New Japan appearances, Jericho wrote, quote, "For the record, the money I reportedly made during my run with New Japan from 2018 to 2020 online currently is completely wrong. I never had a flat per appearance deal. I was paid according to the event, and I made more per event than I did for most of my WrestleMania matches." Jericho, of course, most recently wrestled on the December 14 edition of Dynamite, losing to Action Andretti in a huge upset. I mean, this is one of those weird stories where does it really matter? No. I always think it's funny, like, sometimes just let the ambiguity be out there. If you believe that, you know, if that information's wrong, it's out there. The only reason why Chris Jericho would go to the lengths of putting out on social media, oh, people said that I got paid $100,000 per appearance for New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's not the case. He's basically going, I didn't get paid $100 grand. I got paid way more than that. That's the only reason. Because he wouldn't come out and go, no, actually, that was far over the top. It was actually far less than that. No, he's basically, he saw that or he heard that and he was like, right, I don't want people to think that I'm only worth $100 grand to New Japan Pro Wrestling or New Japan only paid me $100 grand. I want people to know I got paid more, and I got paid more than most of my WrestleMania matches. But to once again reinforce that he made the right move, and he did make the right move. When Chris Jericho left WWE in 2018, and you have to remember too, is the New Japan and WWE stuff overlapped. He was doing the New Japan stuff with Kenny Omega, and then he was still making appearances with WWE. He was at the 25th anniversary of Monday Night Raw in a backstage segment. A few months later, he was at the Greatest Royal Rumble, his final WWE appearance in the Greatest Royal Rumble match. It was only when it was announced that he'd be doing more dates with New Japan, involving the likes of facing Naito and then Tanahashi and winning the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. It was only then that WWE really started to go, actually, we're not going to use you. Because remember, Jericho was going to originally face, at one point, The Undertaker in a casket match, not Rusev, Miro. That whole thing had changed. And then when it was announced that Jericho would be facing, I can't remember, it might have been Naito. Whoever it was, when that was announced, when that match was announced, then they pulled him from the match because they didn't want someone that was going to be working with New Japan in a couple of months working a match with The Undertaker of all people, the WWE sort of icon. They didn't want that. And Vince McMahon said to Jericho, it wasn't because of the New Japan thing, it was a mistake. It was because of the New Japan thing. And then things started to get a bit more frosty, of course, and when Jericho got the offer from AEW, he went to WWE first. He went to WWE and said, this is the offer I have on the table. Can you match it? And Vince McMahon said, I couldn't. He said he couldn't do it. And then Jericho accepted the offer, and he said, did you accept the offer? And he said, yeah. And he said, why did you do that for? So it was a weird one, because I don't know if Vince never actually believed Jericho would go to AEW, even though Jericho had already sort of put some hints out there that that's what he was going to do. He had appeared at All In, and he had kind of, that was the big tease, and he had done the Ring of Honor thing on the Jericho Cruise, even though it wasn't actually on television. Like, he had kind of been, his rule was, I'll never work for a company outside of WWE in the US. And that's why he went, well, it's technically New Japan, it's in a different country, that's okay. But he started to bend his own rule, and then when WWE wouldn't, make him the offer that he felt that he was worth at the time, he went elsewhere, and he's made a lot of money and done very, very, very well since then. And he's done and achieved far more than he would have if he'd have stayed in WWE, by the way. Jericho leaving WWE is one of the best things to happen to him, and arguably the wrestling business in the last, 2 decades or something like that, realistically, because AEW Dynamite in that first 6 months or a year, I'm honestly I'm not sure if it succeeds without Jericho being there. I think it's around. It would have still been on TNT, but I'm not sure they'd have had the quick success that they had and had the renegotiated TV deal for the amount of money that brought in extra people. That's on Chris Jericho's back of being the AEW World Champion at the time. Chris Jericho was such a name and a commodity. He was the first AEW World Champion for a reason, because he was a marketable, bankable name that they could put the World Championship on, and they could launch a cable wrestling television show on. And it worked successfully, and that's because of Jericho. Ricky Starks has had a lot of people talking recently, of course, with his matches against MJF on Winter is Coming. His promo with MJF after he won the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royale on the December 7th edition of Dynamite and as well. And Ricky Starks has actually discussed AEW President Tony Khan's reaction to his promo on the December 7th edition of AEW Dynamite. During the show, Starks and MJF met face-to-face ahead of their AEW World Championship bouts on the December 14 Winter is Coming show. Starks cut a passionate promo during the segment before dropping MJF with a huge spear. He speared him so hard, actually, that he speared him out of his shoes, which was incredible to see. Now, in an interview with Inside the Ropes, Starks noted that Tony Khan thanked him for hitting a home run during the War of Words. Happy with the reaction, Starks said, quote, "Yeah, he was very happy with it, of course. Honestly, I walked backstage and I was like, yeah, that was cool." Tony was like, thank you so much, Ricky. That was great. That was a home run. It's cool that he enjoyed it and he approved of it. Now, of course, MJF ultimately defeated Starks during their AEW World Championship match on this past week's show. He has been announced for an upcoming edition of Dynamite. We'll talk about that later on. Almost the problem is with the Ricky Starks stuff recently is that it was too good, you know? And it kind of felt like, oh man, if MJF was later on in his title reign, there might have been a legitimate thing to go, you know what? Maybe you put the title on Ricky Starks. It's just the fact that it's so early and they've got plans to do MJF versus Danielson. But Ricky Starks, listen to the ovations he has been getting, and he has been getting. I think it's one of these things whereby he's hit it out the park so much with his promos, with the matches. And my hope is now it's just that's a seed planted in Tony Khan's mind of, okay, at some point in the next 18 months maybe, Ricky Starks could be the world champion in AEW. That's my hope. Whether or not Tony Khan sticks with that, we have some people that look like they're building momentum and then they drop off. It kind of does feel like at the moment, isn't it, that AEW is getting back to the sort of area of actually, yeah, we can have people outside of AEW come in and maybe they can be champions or but the important thing is that they work with homegrown talent and they get our homegrown talent over. What you can see right there, excuse me, I pointed the wrong way. What you can see right there is Ricky Starks, who is, I know he's in the NWA, but he hasn't been touched by WWE television, and MJF, two homegrown talent, shall we say. That's what you really need. That's what you need in your main event. Yes, you can have your couple of big stars that have been elsewhere, but in the earlier, I mean, they've only been around 3 years, but in the early stages of AEW, there was a lot of, homegrown stars, and it kind of feels like maybe in the last 12 months, they've kind of got lost a little bit, and they've kind of dropped off, and it feels like coming out of All Out, Tony Khan's realized, actually, you know what, I need to focus more on the talent that's been here for the longest time, and the homegrown talent, the talent we've got over, the talent that's different from WWE, and the talent that's going to be loyal ultimately to us and is not going to want to go back to WWE. That's what I've got to focus on. I can't focus on keeping the talent that ultimately wants to go back to WWE happy. I've got to focus on the talent that want to be here, and that's the homegrown talent. And I think that the recent feud between Starks and MJF's a perfect example of that. Griff Garrison looks like he's going to be out of action for a while because he's recently undergone surgery. AEW star Griff Garrison announced on Twitter that he underwent surgery yesterday. The former member of the Varsity Blondes tweeted a photo from his hospital bed, but did not provide details on the nature of the surgery. The 24-year-old Garrison reassured fans that he'd be back in no time following his recovery. Garrison hasn't been seen on AEW television since the October 7 episode of AEW Rampage, where he and tag team partner Brian Pillman Jr. lost the rights to the Varsity Blondes name to Mark Sterling, who copyrighted it and gave it to the duo of Josh Woods and Tony Nese, now known as the Varsity Athletes. Since then, Garrison and Pillman have only had a handful of matches as the Blondes on AEW Dark and Dark Elevation. Their last match was on the November 8 episode of AEW Dark. Garrison, of course, was one of the standouts of the pandemic era of AEW. At first, Garrison was mainly known as the guy with curly blonde hair who wasn't Jungle Boy and appeared on lots of episodes of Being the Elite, in segments with the Dark Order and the late Brody Lee and John Silver and all that kind of stuff. It was tremendous. However, the young competitor quickly made a name for himself in his match against MJF in 2020 before beginning his tandem with Pillman later in the year. Both Garrison and Pillman were seemingly frustrated with their trajectory in recent months. However, the name change in October seemed to be a much needed repackaging packaging for the duo following the departure of Julia Hart from the group. I just never liked the whole varsity, that whole like, oh, we're college athletes kind of thing. It never has any legs. It never has any legs. The Blondes is better, but there's still a long way to go. But as I mentioned, he's 24, and Brian Pillman Jr. is also very young as well. So they've got plenty of time to find out what they're going to be as a tag team or singles competitors. Hopefully, again, the surgery isn't too bad and he can be back in action fairly soon. A match has been announced for the New Year's Smash edition of AEW Dynamite, and it's a TNT Championship match. And about set up on this week's edition of AEW Rampage, Samoa Joe is set to defend the TNT Championship against its former holder Wardlow on December 28 in Broomfield, Colorado. After making quick work of Exodus Prime on Rampage, Wardlow called out Samoa Joe. Afterwards, Joe answered with a promo from backstage. He stated that he would not defend the TNT title in Texas, the site of the December 21 and 23 Holiday Bash episodes, but he would put the belt on the line against Wardlow on the 28th. The match was officially announced later on in the program. Joe defeated Powerhouse Hobbs and Wardlow in a triple threat match at Full Gear on November 19 to win the TNT title, submitting Hobbs to win the championship. Of course, Joe also currently holds the Ring of Honor World Television Championship, so that's the only match actually announced for Dynamite New Year's Smash. So, I mean, you would think, to be honest, the way that Wardlow is protected, there's no way that Wardlow loses that match, is there? Unless we have some shenanigans. I mean, we could have a situation where maybe Powerhouse Hobbs returns. They're doing that whole Book of Hobbs stuff at the moment. So maybe it might be a case of Powerhouse Hobbs returns and cost Wardlow the match. I guess they could maybe do that, considering that Joe's only just won the championship. So I don't know what they're going to do with that one, because logic would suggest they're going to protect Wardlow, but at the same time, Joe's only just won the title. But we do have a match announced for the New Year's Smash edition of Dynamite. Let me know your predictions in the comment section below. Speaking of Dynamite, we have some announcements for this week's episode on TBS. On the December 14 edition of Dynamite, that being the Winter is Coming edition, MJF defeated Ricky Starks to retain his AEW World Championship. Following the bout, though, Bryan Danielson confronted MJF on the stage before chasing him out of the arena. It's now been announced that Danielson will appear on the upcoming episode of Dynamite. Ricky Starks has also been confirmed for Wednesday's show. Several matches have already been announced for the episode, including an AEW Women's World Championship match, with Jamie Hayter set to defend her gold against Hikaru Shida. Pac, Penta El Zero Miedo, and Rey Fenix are also set to clash with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks in the fifth match of their Best of 7 series. Of course, that match is going to be a no disqualification match, and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega have to win. Otherwise, Death Triangle will retain their AEW World Trios Championships. Logic, they're going to win. The whole story so far is that Death Triangle can only really win the matches if they cheat or if they use the hammer. Well, they're not going to be able to cheat. They are going to be able to use the hammer, but also so are the Young Bucks. So I would think most likely probably the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega, they use the hammer this time, and by using the hammer, they make it 3-2. It's going to go to that final match in Los Angeles, and I ultimately think that the Elite are going to win and win back the championships that they never technically lost, and they actually were the inaugural champions back at All Out earlier this year. So I think that's where they're going. As far as Bryan Danielson, clearly he's setting up a match with MJF at some point for the AEW World Championship. I mean, it gets to that point of the year now where you go, can you stretch this out until Revolution? Clearly that's what it feels like, that Bryan Danielson's going to be the next big opponent for MJF. Again, my thing would be is that can they stretch it out that long? And also as well, as I've said before, I know the story is that MJF attacked William Regal, and that's fine, but at the same time, AEW has a smart audience, and they know the real situation for William Regal leaving isn't because of MJF attacking him, it's because William Regal's gone back to WWE. So I don't know how they pivot. Do they sort of pivot to, you know, you attacked him, Regal's fine, but he decided he didn't want to be in the company anymore? Like, what do they do? Or do they pretend, oh, Regal's still in the hospital, even though they know he's not? I know it's kayfabe, but what do they do? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Finally, the Ring of Honor World Championship will be defended at an upcoming indie event. Of course, last Saturday, Athena defeated Mercedes Martinez for the Ring of Honor Women's Championship at Final Battle. The hard-hitting affair fits with the new version of Athena that fans have seen the last few months. The Ring of Honor Women's Championship is the second title Athena has held since being released from WWE. She is currently the Warrior Wrestling Women's Champion too. In WWE is Ember Moon. She was the NXT Women's Champion and NXT Women's Tag Team Champion with Shotzi Blackheart. But it was announced today that Athena will defend her Ring of Honor Championship against Miyu Yamashita. The match is for Prestige Wrestling at their Vendetta show on Saturday, January 21st. It will be live streamed on IWTV. So a rare Ring of Honor World Championship defense at an indie show. Yamashita is currently signed to TJPW. She's a 3-time Princess of Princess champion and current Pro Wrestling EVE champion. She was ranked number 12 on PWI's Women 150 this year. She faced Thunder Rosa for the AEW Women's Championship in July, but she'll be facing Athena for the Ring of Honor Women's Championship in January. But there you go, guys. It's the latest WWE AEW news for you. It's been a long day with the World Cup final. It's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.